Willow Creek's silent harvest. The accident had been a blur of screeching tires, twisted metal, and then nothing. For Thomas, or Tommy as his parents always called him, the world had simply dissolved into a vast, echoing void. One moment they were laughing, singing along to a terrible pop song on the radio, heading for their summer vacation. The next, he was waking up in a sterile white hospital room, his body aching, his mind a shattered kaleidoscope of fragmented memories. His parents were gone, just like that, vanished from the world he knew, leaving behind a silence that was louder than any crash. He was 10 years old, and suddenly an orphan. His closest living relative was his paternal grandmother, Eleanor Vance, a woman he'd only met a handful of times at Christmas gatherings, her presence always a quiet, elegant hum in the background of their boisterous family. She lived in Willow Creek, a town so small it barely registered on most maps, nestled deep in a valley surrounded by ancient, brooding hills. The journey to Willow Creek felt like a passage into another world. The bustling highway gradually thinned into a winding country road, then a narrow lane canopied by centuries-old oak trees, their branches interlacing like gnarled fingers. The air grew cooler, thicker, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something sweet and vaguely floral, yet with an undertone that felt heavy. As they passed the welcome sign, a faded wooden carving that read, "Willow Creek, where time stands still," Tommy felt a shiver trace his spine. Grandma Eleanor's house was a sprawling Victorian, all dark wood and intricate gables, its paint peeling in places like old skin. It sat on the very edge of town, its backyard bordering the dense, silent expanse of Blackwood Forest. A grand, imposing presence, yet it seemed to sag under the weight of untold years, its windows like vacant, watchful eyes. Eleanor herself was different from what he remembered. Her face, though lined, was remarkably smooth, her eyes a startling shade of pale blue that seemed to hold an unnerving stillness. She moved with a quiet grace, her voice soft, almost a murmur, yet it resonated with an unexpected depth. She hugged him tightly upon his arrival, a fleeting warmth that vanished as quickly as it came. "Welcome home, Thomas," she said, her smile thin, polite, and somehow distant. It didn't reach her eyes. The first few days in Willow Creek were a haze of polite introductions and stifling quiet. The town felt suspended in amber, every movement slow, every conversation hushed. The town square boasted a single general store, a post office, and a tiny ancient church with a leaning steeple. Locals greeted Eleanor with warm smiles and soft waves, their eyes, Tommy noticed, often holding that same unnerving stillness as his grandmother's. They looked placid, almost too placid, like polished stones. Tommy tried to talk about his parents, about the accident. Eleanor would pat his hand, her touch cool. "It was a terrible tragedy, dear," she'd murmur, her voice devoid of the raw grief he associated with death. "But we must look forward now. You're safe here. Willow Creek will take care of you." Her words were meant to be comforting, but they landed like cold stones in his heart. His room was in the attic, a large, dusty space with a sloped ceiling and a single dormer window overlooking the dense forest. At night, the silence was absolute, a heavy velvet blanket that pressed in on him. He'd lie awake, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling, listening for anything. But there was only the sound of his own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of his heart. Faint, ethereal, like dry leaves rustling just outside his window, even on windless nights. They sounded like voices, a multitude of them murmuring just beyond the threshold of understanding. Sometimes a child's faint giggle, impossibly light, followed by a deeper, guttural chuckle that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. He'd sit up, heart hammering, straining to hear. But the moment he focused, they would vanish, leaving only the oppressive silence. He tried asking Eleanor about it. Grandma, did you hear those sounds last night? Like people talking outside? She smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips. That's just the old house settling, dear, or the wind through the pines. You're still adjusting to the quiet. The city was so loud, wasn't it? Her explanation was calm, logical, yet it felt like a dismissal, a subtle evasion. Then came the peculiar shifts. His favorite toy car, a beat-up red Mustang, would disappear from his bedside table, only to reappear on his dresser. A book he was reading would be found on the floor, open to a different page. He'd retrace his steps meticulously, his young mind trying to impose order on the chaos. But there was no logical explanation. He mentioned it to Eleanor. She simply smiled that distant smile. "Oh, the spirits of old houses," she'd say, a faint, almost imperceptible amusement in her eyes. They liked to play. The feeling of being watched was constant. He'd be playing in the backyard, building a fort out of fallen branches, and feel a prickling sensation on his neck, as if eyes were boring into him from the dark edge of Blackwood Forest. He'd spin around, but there was never anything there, just the ancient trees, their branches too still, their shadows too deep. He started seeing movement in his peripheral vision, a flicker of white, a darting shadow, only for it to vanish when he looked directly. He noticed the townspeople's routine. Every morning, precisely at 7 a.m., a bell would chime from the church steeple, a soft, resonant sound that seemed to hum through the air. And every day, around noon, a group of the older residents, all with that same vacant stillness in their eyes, would gather in the town square by the ancient, gnarled willow tree that gave the town its name. They would stand there, perfectly still, facing the tree, for exactly 10 minutes, then disperse without a word. No conversation, no laughter, just silent observation. It wasn't a vigil, it felt like a ritual. It felt like a ritual. One afternoon, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desperate need to understand, Tommy decided to follow the older residents to the willow tree. He hid behind the general store, peering around the corner as they gathered. The tree was enormous, its branches weeping towards the ground like a sorrowful giant. Its bark was scarred and twisted, forming strange, almost symbolic patterns. As the group stood before it, silent and still, Tommy felt the air grow heavy, thick with a subtle yet powerful hum that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. He noticed a faint, sweet smell, like lilies left too long in a vase, mixed with something earthy, something metallic. It was the same smell he'd noticed when he first arrived in Willow Creek. He felt a profound sense of unease, a cold dread seeping into his bones. When the 10 minutes were up and they dispersed, he saw one of the women, Mrs. Gable, glance directly at his hiding spot, her eyes holding a knowing, empty smile before she calmly walked away. He hadn't thought she'd seen him. Tommy started exploring. He spent hours in the tiny public library, a dusty, quiet place run by a stern-faced woman named Miss Davies, whose smile was as thin and distant as Eleanor's. He looked for anything, old newspapers, local history books, anything that might explain the strangeness. He found references to Willow Creek's unusually long periods of prosperity, interrupted by periodic blights, vague mentions of illness, crop failures, or livestock deaths, always followed by a swift, inexplicable return to abundance. He stumbled upon a section labeled Local Lore, a small neglected shelf filled with handwritten pamphlets and faded, brittle journals. One journal, bound in dark leather, caught his eye. It was titled The Chronicle of Willow Creek, dated from the early 1800s. The script was elegant but faded, and the language was archaic, yet he managed to decipher fragments. The deep heart of the forest, the ancient ones slumber, for bountiful harvest, for peace, the pact was made, a balance must be kept, the tribute, the chosen few, the whispering grove, the words sent a chill down his spine. Ruth. He remembered the willow tree, the silent gatherings. He remembered the feeling of being watched. He brought the journal to Eleanor that evening. "Grandma, what does this mean? The tributes, the ancient ones?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Eleanor took the journal, her fingers tracing the faded script. Her calm facade seemed to crack for a split second, a flicker of something unreadable in her pale blue eyes. "Some things are best left undisturbed, Thomas," she said, her voice softer than usual, yet with an underlying steel that chilled him. "Old stories, superstitions. Willow Creek has always been a private place. We respect our traditions. They keep us safe." She closed the journal and placed it on a high shelf he couldn't reach. His grandmother's evasiveness only fueled his desperate need to know. He started listening more intently to the whispers at night. They were clearer now, distinct, weaving through the absolute silence. He could almost make out words, fragmented phrases, always just out of reach. He heard his mother's voice, faint, calling his name, mournful, then his father's, deeper, urging him to run. He'd cry out, jump from his bed, expecting to see them, but there was only the empty darkness of his attic room. Was it grief, or was it something else, something trying to reach him? He started having nightmares. Vivid, terrifying dreams where the willow tree in the town square would twist into a monstrous sentient being, its branches stretching like arms, its roots coiling around the town. He'd see the townspeople, their faces blank, their eyes vacant, walking into its gaping maw, disappearing into the darkness. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, screaming, Eleanor always there, her hand on his forehead, cool and unsettlingly calm. "Just a dream, dear," she'd murmur, her voice like a balm, yet her eyes seemed to observe him with a detached curiosity. "You're safe." He noticed her sleeping habits. She was always awake before him, always the last to go to bed. He'd hear her moving quietly downstairs in the dead of night, sometimes a faint, rhythmic chanting sound, barely audible, coming from the living room. He tried to sneak down once, but the floorboards creaked under his weight and the sound instantly stopped. Eleanor would appear at the bottom of the stairs, a silent, watchful shadow. "Couldn't sleep, dear?" she'd ask, her voice perfectly normal, her eyes holding their usual calm. The town itself seemed to become more sentient, more menacing. The willow tree felt like a vast, unblinking eye watching him. The general store owner, Mr. Miller, would give him peculiar gifts, a shiny, polished stone, a small, intricately carved wooden bird, always with that same unsettling, knowing smile. The air grew heavier, the floral metallic scent more pervasive, especially around the town square. He realized the disappearances weren't just historical. He overheard hushed conversations, quickly silenced when he approached. A family, the Johnsons, who had moved to Willow Creek a few months before him, had suddenly left town. No goodbye, no forwarding address, just gone. Their house, now empty, felt hollow and cold. One day, while playing near the creek, Tommy stumbled upon an old, overgrown path leading deeper into Blackwood Forest than he'd ever dared to go. The air grew colder, the trees pressed in, their ancient branches forming a dark, suffocating canopy. He felt a powerful pull, an undeniable draw towards something. He pushed through the thick undergrowth, his heart hammering. He found it, the Whispering Grove. It was a small clearing, strangely devoid of sunlight, even in the middle of the day. In its center stood a circle of ancient, moss-covered stones, and in the very middle a shallow, dark pool of water, eerily still, reflecting the brooding sky like a black mirror. The air here was thick with the cloying, sweet metallic scent. And the whispers, they were loud here, a cacophony of voices, all murmuring, all indistinct, yet he could feel their pressure on his eardrums, a painful hum. He looked into the dark pool, and for a split second he saw them. Their faces, pale and distorted, reflected in the water, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths opening in silent screams. He stumbled back, gasping, falling to his knees. His mind reeled. It was a hallucination. It had to be. His grief, his loneliness, twisting his mind. But then the whispers coalesced, becoming clearer, closer. Not his parents' voices, but something else. An ancient, resonant murmur that seemed to come from the very ground beneath his feet. The pact is upheld, the balance maintained, the new bloom. Your resonance is strong, child. He scrambled backwards, terrified. The pool rippled, even though there was no wind. And in its dark depths he saw a fleeting image, not faces, but a vast, unseen presence, something immense and formless, stirring beneath the earth. He fled, crashing through the undergrowth, not stopping until he burst out of the forest, gasping, covered in scratches, the sunlight a blinding, welcome shock. He rushed home, desperate to tell Eleanor, to make her understand. He burst into the living room where she sat knitting by the fireplace, her silhouette calm against the flickering flames. "Grandma, I found it! The Whispering Grove! I saw them!" And the whispers, they talked about a pact, about a bloom, about resonance. He cried, his voice hoarse, verging on hysteria. Eleanor slowly lowered her knitting on hysteria. Her pale blue eyes, usually calm, now held a deep, unblinking intensity he'd never seen before. Her smile, thin and distant, stretched wider than usual, revealing teeth that seemed a little too long, a little too sharp. The faint, sweet metallic scent, he realized with a jolt of horror, was strongest around her. "Ah, Thomas," she murmured, her voice soft, but resonating with that deep, unnerving hum he'd heard at the willow tree in the grove. "You were always so observant, so curious." "Just like your mother." His blood ran cold. His mother. "She found the grove too, you know," Eleanor continued, her eyes fixed on him, an unsettling glint in their depths. "Tried to break the pact, tried to take your father away, but Willow Creek, it doesn't like to lose its own, or its tributes." Tommy's breath hitched. What are you saying?" "The accident, dear," Eleanor said, her voice completely calm, utterly devoid of emotion. A voice completely calm, utterly devoid of emotion. "Oh." "Your father's family has always carried the purest resonance. It's a gift, a blessing for the town." She stood up, gliding towards him, her movements fluid, almost inhumanly graceful. "And you, Thomas, you have the strongest resonance I've seen in generations, a truly magnificent bloom." He stumbled backwards, a primal scream tearing from his throat. His grandmother, the only family he had left, was not his protector. She was part of it, part of the town's horrifying secret. She had orchestrated his parents' deaths, or at least allowed them to be taken, and now she was preparing him for the tribute, for the harvest. "You're mad!" he shrieked, tears streaming down his face. "You're a monster!" Her smile widened, that too sharp, too wide smile. "Not mad, dear, just practical. We ensure the prosperity of Willow Creek. A small price to pay, wouldn't you agree?" She extended a hand, her fingers long and pale, reaching for him. "Come, Thomas. It's time for the final ceremony. The town is waiting. They're all so excited to welcome you, truly." The floral metallic scent, sweet and cloying, overwhelmed him, making him gag. He felt a powerful, unseen force pulling at him, drawing him towards her, towards the front door. He struggled, fought, his small body writhing against the invisible currents. He saw the flicker in her eyes, a brief glimpse of something not human, something ancient and hungry, dwelling beneath the placid surface of his grandmother. He broke free, scrambling towards the back door, desperate to escape into the blackwood forest. He knew it was dangerous, terrifying, but anything was better than staying. He heard Eleanor's voice, not angry, but with an amused, resonant hum behind him. "You can't escape, Thomas. Willow Creek holds its own." He burst out the back door, racing across the lawn towards the familiar yet now menacing shadows of the forest. He could hear her moving behind him, not running but gliding, keeping pace. The whispers returned, a deafening chorus around him, calling his name, mocking him, promising him oblivion. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs gave out. He collapsed against the gnarled roots of a massive oak, gasping for breath, the world spinning around him. He could hear Eleanor's footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching. Then, from the depths of the forest, a new sound erupted, not a whisper, not a hum, a high-pitched, piercing shriek that seemed to tear through the very fabric of the air. It was followed by a series of guttural growls, a thudding sound, and then silence, a different kind of silence. Not the oppressive, expectant silence of Willow Creek, but a sudden, terrifying emptiness. The whispers stopped. The re-skiers stopped. The reel vanished. The cloying scent dissipated. Tommy lay there, trembling for what felt like an eternity. He slowly pushed himself up, his body aching, his mind reeling. He heard nothing, saw nothing. The forest was still, too still. He stumbled to his feet and slowly, cautiously walked back towards Eleanor's house, his heart pounding with a desperate mixture of fear and a chilling curiosity. He reached the edge of the lawn. The back door was ajar. He crept closer, peering inside. The living room was empty. The knitting lay abandoned on the floor beside the armchair. A faint scent of ozone hung in the air. There was no sign of Eleanor, no struggle, no blood, nothing, just absence. He walked through the house, turning on lights, his steps echoing in the sudden cavernous silence. He went into Eleanor's bedroom. It was meticulously tidy, every item in its place. But on her bedside table he saw it, a small, intricately carved wooden bird, the same one Mr. Miller had given him. He picked it up. It felt warm, almost humming faintly in his hand. He knew she was gone, but he didn't know how or why. Had something in the forest claimed her? Had her own pack turned on her? Or had she simply transcended? He spent the rest of the night huddled in his attic room, the wooden bird clutched in his hand, listening to the new, terrifying silence of the house, of the town. The group of older residents gathered at the willow tree, their faces calm, their eyes empty, performing their silent ritual. No one asked about Eleanor. No one seemed to notice her absence. It was as if she had simply never existed. Tommy knew he couldn't stay. He walked to the general store, found the spare set of his grandmother's car keys hanging behind the counter. Mr. Miller simply nodding, his eyes holding that knowing, empty smile. Tommy drove her car, a battered old sedan, out of Willow Creek. No one tried to stop him. The welcome sign, Willow Creek, where time stands still, seemed to mock him as he passed it. He drove until the sun began to set, until the familiar hum of city traffic replaced the oppressive silence of the valley. He found a small, cheap motel, his mind a chaotic mess of grief, terror, and an unsettling understanding. He eventually found a distant aunt who took him in, a kind woman who lived far away in a bustling city. He told her his parents died in an accident, the official story. He never mentioned Willow Creek. He never mentioned Eleanor, or the whispers, or the growing dread. How could he? She wouldn't believe him. No one would. He's an adult now. He has a life, a job, friends. He's tried to forget. He's tried to convince himself it was trauma, a child's overactive imagination, a breakdown induced by grief. He clings to logic, to reason, but it's a losing battle. From that day, he still remains thinking about it. About Willow Creek, a town suspended in a horrifying pact, its tranquility bought at an unspeakable price. He wonders what happened to Eleanor, if she became part of the Ancient Ones or if she was simply consumed. He wonders about the new bloom, about the next tribute. He wonders if the townspeople know, truly know, what they are doing, or if they are merely vacant vessels, tools of an ancient, hungry entity. He notices the faint, sweet metallic scent sometimes, drifting on a breeze or clinging to an old book. He hears whispers just on the edge of hearing in the quiet moments of the night. He sees the peculiar stillness in some people's eyes, the smiles that don't quite reach them. He still carries the small, intricately carved wooden bird Mr. Miller gave him, now cool and silent, a constant, unsettling reminder. He can never truly escape. The horrors of Willow Creek are etched into his soul, a permanent, terrifying reality that no amount of logic or distance can erase. He lives with the chilling question, was it all a delusion, a product of his grief-stricken mind? Or did he truly glimpse the true, terrifying nature of his grandmother, of Willow Creek, and of the unspeakable entity that slumbers beneath the earth, eternally waiting for its next tribute, its next bloom, forever ensuring that time stands still in that picturesque valley? The answer remains, a silent scream in the chambers of his mind, forever wondering, forever haunted. Thanks for watching. The veil between our world and theirs is thinner than you think. Each like, each share, each subscription strengthens the connection. Feed the channel before it feeds on you.